I'm Lisa Pickering, and welcome to CITV's Press Talk. Here's the most recent news and information from the government of Bermuda.
Good afternoon to the press corps. This weekend we've seen a very windy and blustery weekend. This morning we had a number of people inquiring whether schools were open. As you can imagine, the EMO meets and a decision was made over the weekend to keep the bridge open and that all schools will be open today. We believe that it's very important for the people in the community to get your information from credible sources. The Ministry of National Security, we will be the front of giving you information. Standing beside me on my right, I have Steve Cosham. He's the National Disaster Coordinator. I'm going to ask Inspector Cosham just to give us an update on where we are with the storm and what we can expect in the next 24 hours.
Good afternoon, everybody. The update from the Bermuda Weather Service on the wind conditions are much the same as they were this morning, and it's virtually a repeat of Saturday's weather. So at the moment we have wind gusting blowing 35 to 45 sustained, gusting 50 to 55. This is going to build as the afternoon and evening develops, and 9 p.m. to midnight is going to reach its peak, where we're expecting to see winds straight out the west, which is favourable for the causeway, staying open, and it's going to be sustained at 45 to 55 knots, with gusts between 60 and 65, and as we get to midnight, gusts between 65 and 70. It's the sustain we're interested in, which is 45 to 55. And with everything happening on the causeway, so we have high tide at 11:11, but the main thing is the winds are out the west, which, as we saw on Saturday, put the causeway in the lee. It was protected by Grotto Bay Hill. So we're looking at the causeway is going to stay open. It's going to be monitored later on, but after midnight, the winds start dying down all the way through into Tuesday.
Before we go ahead, the causeway, as you just heard, will remain open. Schools are open. All government offices will remain open. Oftentimes, we're a country, we're an island. We're going to go through certain conditions. We believe that it's important for us to do what we've always done, we are resilient, and we have a clear plan of action. We would advise anyone that is on the road at any time over the next 24 hours, even going past that, to drive with care and caution. We are used to these sorts of things, and we ask everyone to exercise extreme caution when traveling. Again, the causeway will not be closed, schools will not be closed, and all government offices will remain open.
So why didn't people know that this morning?
People should have known that this morning. Again, remember, Ciola, we are in... When the information was put out on Friday, we said this is what the forecast is going to be over the next 3 days. The causeway will remain open, and if there are any changes, i.e. if the circumstances become more dire, we will notify the public. Every day, the advisories went out to the public, and again, the storm has passed, and we now know that it's coming back. There was absolutely no need, besides, obviously people want to get their children home safely, but there was never any indication that this will be a storm that will require the island to be shut down, specifically government buildings, schools, and the causeway to be closed.
Yeah, just one. I mean, I spoke to the Bermuda Weather Service. I'm sure you've been in touch with them, and they forecast 60 to 70 knot gusts, which are technically hurricane strength. Was that of any concern to any of you on the board?
If you have to look at when you talk about winds, you cannot just use wind as the only factor. There are a number of other factors when you're looking at the causeway of people on the road. There are a myriad of factors that we consider when we look at the matrix. There is a matrix when deciding whether or not to close schools, government offices, and the causeway. And we believed when we looked at all of those factors in our matrix that it does not warrant closing the schools.
Of interest, what are those factors?
Well, Steve, can you give us the factors, please?
So the wind is a key factor, but it's not the most important. Stats from around the countries, US particular, shows that water is the killer of people, not the wind. The wind will drive the water, but we are looking at wind straight out the west, and we saw on Saturday that the causeway was in the lee, and causeway conditions were great. In fact, Kinleyfield Road was a lot windier, and there were bikes that had trouble on Kinleyfield Road. But we never closed Kinleyfield Road. We just look at the the bridges, and maybe we should look at some of the other exposed areas. But because of the nature of the island, there's plenty of exposed areas that we have. So people just have to take responsibility for themselves and exercise caution and say, should I be going out when the wind is like this, if I'm on a two-wheel vehicle or on a high-sided vehicle? So we have the wind, we have the high tide, which we take into account, and the height of that tide. We also take the wind direction and also what swells are out there. And when you put that all in the mix, it means that we are cautious and we're watching the causeway for the potential for it to close, but we don't expect it will. And don't forget, the weather forecast is just that, it's a forecast. Bermuda Weather Service have a high degree of confidence in the forecast, but all it is their prediction of what's going to happen. And should it go up, we're in a condition, a position where we can close the causeway should we need to. But we do not expect, if things remain as they are, it will close.
Jasmine, our main concern is always the preservation of life, making sure that our people are protected. So I don't want to minimize and make it look as that is an after concern. That is always the biggest concern that we have. But we also have a number of other commercial concerns. If you can imagine what it will do to our tourist product if we close down the island for days, what that will reverberate with through our tourism corridor, what it looks like if schools are closed for the school year. And so we make sure that when we make a decision, that it is contemplated, that we go through the matrix, and that we make a wise decision. We constantly do not just leave the decision after it's made. We constantly monitor it. As a matter of fact, we leave the bridge, the big banners that are blocking the bridge. We have personnel that are there for the majority of the time. So if there is a need to rapidly close the bridge, the staff are in place to do that. So I don't want anyone to think that we just make a decision and we go and we bunker down. This is a decision that is constantly looked at, but it's based on some specific and weather-based factors.
Just in hindsight, though, I see that you're saying today the storm is whatever, it's going to die down, and as far as we know, school is open. The EMO met over the weekend.
It did not meet at the weekend.
Or took a decision, did a 3-day protection. In hindsight, don't you think there should have been some announcement this morning to allay people's fears?
So,
in hindsight,
because
there was a lot of confusion on social media.
And
was unnecessary.
And see, that's just it. We are a government and we are our official source of information. The government this morning sent out the official communique.
What time?
I'm not sure of the time, but it was early this morning.
Before school time.
Well, the reality of it is the indication was given at the weekend that the bridge will be open and that there was no need to close the schools. This morning, through the benefit, social media has its blessings and it has its curses. And one of the curses in Bermuda that the grapevine becomes the official source of information. We're just simply trying to tell the public that we have an official mode of communication and hence this press conference. The press conference is as follows: schools remain open, government offices will remain open, and the causeway will remain open.
Because it wasn't too long ago, it's been some time, but people went to sleep the night before Emily thinking it was coming at lunchtime, and it was on top of us first thing in the morning.
And as Inspector Cosham said, that one of the reasons why we do a watching brief on this is because we understand that things can change rapidly. And all the elements are in place, that if something does happen quickly, we have our public affairs officers that are at the ready to put out the necessary public advisories to get people notified.
So when the grapevine takes over next time, people need to go to WW Weather. Where do they go to say school is open?
No, school's open. Go to school, and if schools are closed, you'll be notified. Listen, let's have some real conversation. Yeah. I have a nephew, and guess what my nephew was saying last night? He was on his knees praying for me. You know why?
He didn't want to go to school.
He didn't want to go to school today. And this long weekend, I looked out my window this morning, and I saw those trees blowing. And let me tell you, I wouldn't have said no if Steve would have called me and said, well, we're calling everything off. And so we have a natural bias on Monday morning. We don't, we were looking at this thing.
So it was Monday morning blues.
It was Monday morning, a myriad of factors. But I don't want to minimize that whilst I'm making light of it. I don't want to make light of it. We as a community have to be prepared, and we think we are.
You've been watching Press Talk right here on CITV. Join us next time for your government's news and information. I'm Lisa Pickering.